After the U.S. Congress passed the Equal Rights Amendment in March 1972, it went to the state legislatures for ratification. That year, Illinois failed to ratify it. By the spring of '73, when this film was being made, the proponents of the ERA were campaigning for the second time for ratification in the Illinois House of Representatives. On March 14th, 8 days before the amendment was to come before the House Executive Committee, a group called Housewives for ERA provided a breakfast for their legislators in the state capitol at Springfield.
We struggle together, yearning to be free. We gather here to talk and share ideas, each of us deep inside trying to be the person you made us at creation, to uncover our reserves and discover our strengths and talents. We give thanks for who we are and for who we can be because of your unending love shown to us in Jesus Christ. Amen.
Boy, they go first class, don't they? Can we do this again tomorrow?
Well, you're one up on me. I haven't been to the
Well, if we can get all your clothes, we'll do it every morning.
Well, this certainly beats that loaf of bread I got yesterday.
Well, I'll tell you what, it certainly beats the last campaign they had on the ERA.
And as I said before, tie up the federal constitution with an amendment that you really don't need because the court decisions are liberal enough that you got it now. It's silly. And I think you're wasting the legislature's time with all this.
Sure I do.
You're wasting all the state legislature's times in ratification because it's here. And symbolism is nothing to tie up an amendment to the federal constitution. 5'2" man is, I'll bet you, 99 times out of 100 stronger than a 5'2" woman who can lift. Unless all you girls are going to have mandatory barbell lifting to catch up with them.
I don't think you got a housewife in this whole place, you know that?
I'm a housewife.
Yeah. The service is bad. We had to wait a half an hour to be waited on. The service is bad, and the grapefruit, the segments weren't evenly balanced out. A little tough to get out.
Well, I don't have any complaints about the service.
You don't, huh? That's because you're single.
You know, Illinois
What
is
do you
very...
want? You just want a blanket.
We want the freedom of opportunity. The freedom of choice is what we're asking.
You don't think you have that there?
No.
If you prevent women from fulfilling their potential, then you are against fulfilling the potential of this country.
I suggest I'm not, by opposing equal rights amendment, I'm not prohibiting women to seek out life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
Because look at the past history of this country. It's prevented women from living out their potential. They have not been able to.
I don't know, I met a few women lawyers
You see,
here
if
today.
that
I have women
Constitution
doctors
covered-
working for me in my medical center. I have women in every engineering field today. What gave them their
2%,
opportunities?
3%.
Pardon me?
2%, 3%, those are super
Listen,
women.
I know a lot of janitors that aren't engineers, or males that aren't lawyers and doctors too. So
Sure,
I mean, you know,
people need to choose their own professions.
that's right.
There's
And
no
I say
problem
to you
about
very
that.
honestly that the working women in Illinois, the working women, not the business of professional women, do not need the Equal Rights Amendment. They need protective labor legislation. But you don't represent the... Now listen, once again, you get back to the question I posed to you. As a 14-year-old boy, should he be allowed to work in a coal mine? Because he wants to.
That's children's legislation.
Okay, so it's protected. Should we
But
not,
this
as a
doesn't apply
society,
to
have a
adult
right?
people.
But-
You think that women are different than men, and let me tell you that in the work world they're not different. I can and have lifted 150-pound weights, and I can do it because I am big, and I think all women
I'm a
who
male.
are like that and men who are small shouldn't have to do it. Women who can work those jobs should be allowed to. Protective legislation prevents them from getting those jobs
Mary,
and
you
from
don't really
supporting their
pretend
families.
to tell me that you represent the working women of America.
I work.
May I have your attention? Within a week after you're at home, set up a letter-writing coffee clutch. Invite 10 or 20 gals in your community.
Co-sponsor of the ERA bill, Representative Kitty Dyer.
And postcards ready. And no matter which way your representatives or senators voted, get mail to them. The ones who are inclined to vote yes need the backing and the warmth of your mail thanking them for a yes vote. They need to be able to respond to the harpies that harp on them, and urging them to vote no. They need to be able to say, I had to respond to my mail and it was 3-1 for. Give them a reason to vote yes. And if you flood your reps with enough mail, maybe some of those no votes can come over in response to their own constituency.
If your legislator came, you didn't talk to him, go up to the State House and say, I was here, I'm sorry I missed you. It's very important that they know that somebody from their district came. So if you have not seen your legislator, be sure that you go up to the State House. If you don't know how to contact them, we have information here at the information table about that.
It's very important that you wear an ERA button, indicate who you are, make yourself known. If you can't find your legislator, call him off the floor. If he's not there, go to his office. Do your best to find him. Leave him a note, whatever you have to do. Let your legislators know how much you welcome their support, to thank them for their support.
Co-sponsor of the ERA bill, Representative Eugenia Chapman.
And don't be shy. Legislators are used to talking to people, but do be friendly and do recognize that every single legislator has a right to cast his vote as his conscience dictates. So let's see if we can't show our General Assembly that the proponents of the legislation represent the very finest in not only womanhood but humanity. I have one more statement. Mrs. Wolf is supposed to call her babysitters. So she'll come over here, I'll give her the number. The thing we're trying to do is, for a start, counteract what the anti-ERA forces are doing. So, at least they were here yesterday with their home-baked bread. We're here today in the kitchen, and we're with our children and, our Eggs Benedict and the whole bit. And if this is what you have to do to get the vote. You have to be schmaltzy and down to earth and appeal to them on whatever level they understand. That's fine. That's all we're trying to do. And at least we want the people, even if they're going to vote against it, to just see that we are, normal women, and we aren't weirdos, and we aren't hippies, and we aren't liberals, and we aren't all these, titles they give us.
Yesterday, we understand that the anti-ERA forces, Phyllis Schlafly and her group, got paper bags with little loaves of bread in them and gave them to all the legislators with the message to the breadwinners from the bread makers. And we didn't even know they were planning this, and then we had our brunch today, and I think it just proves that we like the kitchen just as much as they say they do. We're not afraid of it.
Although there's a broad base of support for the ERA all over the state, it's been, the most vocal supporters have been from Chicago, and it's been hard to get in touch with the women in the rural areas and the distant suburbs. And I think this is a start towards that. Now they've come here and they feel more useful. They know they've met us, and we've met them, and now it's going to be easier to work together and to have a free interchange.
Well, first of all, you didn't make a chair breakfast this morning.
I'm sorry. I'm very sorry.
And I want kind of a moldy sweet roll of this.
moldy sweet roll.
Jim, you're from our district.
Right.
The constituents, I feel, at least the women I've talked to, both in Chicago and in Evanston, are so firmly behind ERA. And you haven't committed yourself.
I haven't committed myself?
Well, you've committed yourself more no than yes. Why?
Well, Nancy, I feel that ERA is something that's subjective in nature. To me, we have in Illinois all the advantages of ERA, but when you ask me to do something that will make people unequal by the constitutional amendment, I say I would never support it.
How do you say unequal?
Unequal, and that I realize that the gal that goes to church, you and I, when we go into an office, we're equal. I mean, it's your brains against my brains.
No,
but when we go into a factory, I mean, it's your brawn against my brawn. And I don't think that's right, to subject you to the same toils, the same hardships that we were created differently for. And so that's my position.
We passed legislation last session which provided for interscholastic activity and sports for girls. They didn't have this before. Now with this amendment, we can't have that distinction. There will be interscholastic sports, period. There can be one team, boys and girls. Very few girls will be able to compete with the boys.
To me, it's a little bit comical that we're getting these predictions of dire effects from ERA when in Illinois we've had an equal rights amendment in our own state constitution for over a year. Families seem to be staying together. Women don't seem to be sinking into the depths as some of the opponents would have us believe. So I think there's really no problem with ERA, and I'm very happy to be a sponsor. I'm glad you all are down here today.
Has March come out for ERA?
Oh, yeah.
I know that some of the representatives' wives have one.
No, my wife is very firmly for it. She is a working wife, and she has, as a matter of fact, felt the pains and the burdens of job discrimination, and so she's very firmly for it. She gives me great support in that respect.
I think they should be at home cleaning their own house and taking care of their family, which is the primary duty of a woman. I know this morning before I had men for dinner. We live on a farm, and there was 3 or 4 hours of work for all of us to do, to milk cows and that before we came up here, and we fixed meals for several people before we came. So we feel a woman's place is in the home, but they have a right, and under our present rights, 14th Amendment, they have all these rights already. So I think definitely this Equal Rights Amendment will be very dangerous.
I think equality is the objective, and that's what the proponents say they want. They want absolutely equal treatment for women and men. And I don't think that is a benefit to the women. I think equality is really a step down for what American women have, from what American women enjoy today. We think it will take away from women some of the most important rights and benefits that we now have. For example, the laws of all our states require a husband to support his wife and children. We think these are good laws. These are the laws which enable a woman to be in her home, bring up her baby in her own home, supported by her husband. These are the laws which would be invalidated by ERA because no longer would you be able to have any legislation that imposes an obligation on one sex that it does not impose on another. Another area is the matter of the draft. The Equal Rights Amendment will make women subject to the draft on an equal basis with men, and we don't think that's in the best interest of women, and we don't think it's what the majority of American men or women want.
Can I have your attention, please? March 22nd, the day of the Executive Committee hearing.
Are coming back. My name is Linda Strassman. I'm a part-time staff assistant to Representatives Eugenia Chapman and Giddy Dyer, and it has been my responsibility to get you all together, find out what you're going to talk about, and basically structure our part of the hearing. Now, let me just run down a few of the procedural things for those of you who have perhaps never testified before. The hearing is going to be held on the House floor because of the size of the galleries expected. It's the House Executive Committee. The chairman is Representative Phil Collins. He has allotted each side, the opponents and the proponents, 1 hour for testimony time. Okay? Now, basically what I have done is taken all of you and what you have to say and who you're speaking for and where you're from and tried to orchestrate it into 1 hour. Now, he's going to be very firm about that time limit. The first thing that procedurally that you have to do is turn in a witness slip. Now, Barbara Hauber, back there in the gray and white dress, who's been talking to you as you come in, is collecting these witness slips. This is an official part of the committee record, and you can't testify without it. And you should just fill it out, and the bill that you're testifying on is House Joint Resolution CA-14, and you are a proponent. We will take care of making sure that the chairman gets them in the order in which you're to speak. Basically, there are 3 kinds of witnesses. There are celebrity-type witnesses. There are people who represent organizations who perhaps individually are not important, but the fact that their organization there is important. And there are people who can speak to particular objections, substantive objections. Now, there are about 30 of you, and we have an hour, which means that I've allotted approximately 2 minutes to everyone. The order in which your name appears here is the order in which I have arranged for you to speak. And we've put a lot of thought into this to try to hit Democrats and Republicans to make sure that the substantive arguments are heard while all the committee members are still there and so forth. Does anyone have any questions at this point? Okay, and another thing, once we start doing a dry run through this, Pinky and I have been trying to think of probing questions that they may ask at the end. The key things that I think the opposition is going to focus on, let me just run those down to you, are that it isn't needed for all of the legal reasons, okay? The 14th Amendment, we have it in the Constitution, there's the Equal Pay Act, there's the Civil Rights Act, all of that argument. Another key argument will be that this will be disruptive to the family, that it will force women to go out and work, force children into daycare centers, so that the argument of, you know, a housewife-free ERA is a very important thing. Now, Ori Pruchinsky, could you just...
Okay, I'll start out and I'll just state my name. I'm Ori Pruchinsky. I'm representing my father, former Congressman Roman Pruchinsky. Ladies and gentlemen, my father asked me to extend to you his regrets that pressing family business out of the state prevents him from joining you today in your deliberations on the proposed Equal Rights Amendment. The Congress passed this amendment because it was clear that even in the decade of the 70s, there is discrimination because of sex. The statistical evidence of that discrimination will be discussed by other witnesses. The statistics, however, reveal only the measurable difficulties faced by women in our society. The statistics do not show the pressure on women to produce measurable work, while men are less likely to be called upon to show what they are doing or have accomplished in a day. The statistics do not reveal the attitude of men who refuse to take direction from women, or the subtle discrimination against women in the professions. They cannot reveal the millions of women who do not work, but who would if adequate daycare facilities were available.
You're about 4.5 minutes.
Okay.
And I would suggest that you cut out some of that business in the beginning about what it does, the pressures women feel. Okay? I mean, edit it down that way. And if you're 3 minutes, that's, you know, if you can get it down, we can go through it again.
Regardless of what you have been asked to speak about, there may be somebody. For example, we have a woman representative. She was a lieutenant commander in the Navy, Adeline Giacaris. So if there, for example, a question comes from the draft, we will ask whoever, I don't remember who we assign the draft to refer to Adeline or let us refer that person to Adeline, and she'll speak on the draft. So the gist of it is, if you're not an expert, you know, on whatever it is we've asked you to speak on, we've got an expert here, and we want that expert to answer the question. Okay? Is that agreeable to everybody? Understood? Were there any questions that any of you were particularly concerned about that you think might come up, just to ease your own minds? Is there anything that's particularly bothering you? You know, if they ask about this or...
Are you covered on the insurance, right?
Yes, we're covered on insurance.
Has the question about mobility come up? Because even if Illinois is a perfect state,
no, and that's an excellent
to
point.
Indiana or Texas, God help
That's a very good point. Who would like to speak to that? Yeah, who feels really qualified?
I can speak to that. NEA is national, IA is local, and a lot of teachers do that.
The lawyers are going to cover that too.
Oh, well, then never mind. Let them already say. Okay.
Let's go right at the stand. Yes? Over there, over in there.
The only important statement is this.
Here, let me...
What about here?
No, we want to stay together over here.
What I'll do is come and get you.
Oh, great. I've got them in order. Oh, swell. Okay. Just so that you know, yes, there are some omissions on that you don't know about, but you will be told, okay, come up here, and in order to save time...
We had intended to call other bills, which we are required by rule first, but because of the late hour, I think we'll proceed right to House Joint Resolution Constitutional Amendment 14. And with respect to that constitutional amendment, I'll recognize Representative Dyer. Before Mrs. Dyer begins, I'd like to call the committee's attention to the fact that I have talked to representatives from both sides of this question, and we have agreed that each side will be allowed 1 hour to present testimony concerning the resolution. We will not count any of the committee's questions against either side's hour. And with that understanding, Mrs. Dyer, it is now 4:27, and will you please proceed?
Right. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, guests, everybody, I am very proud and pleased to be a Republican sponsor of the resolution to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. Now, what does this amendment say? Very simply, equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of sex. What is this but just a matter of simple justice? Just extending to women the basic rights that their fathers, husbands, brothers, and sons were born with. Now, this is your moment in history, members of the Executive Committee. At this moment, I've just received the news that the state of Washington has just ratified the Equal Rights Amendment.
I would like to remind our guests in the gallery that they are here as guests of the House, and any such outburst is against the rules of the House, and I'm not going to tolerate any more.
The proposed Equal Rights Amendment does not overnight eliminate all of the injustices or indignities suffered by women. It does provide, however, redress for grievances based on discrimination because of sex. And it is important to note that this redress is available not only to women, but also to men.
Just because classification based on sex is eliminated, in no way does this eliminate other reasonable kinds of classification. It is still permissible to classify people by experience and education and ability and in numerous other ways. There really seems to be a misunderstanding here. It is classification by sex that is being prohibited here.
And such wide-based and strong support has developed for this ratification as to make the charge that this amendment is somehow an instrument of women's liberation quite ridiculous. President Nixon is no member of Women's Lib. He is a man whose love and concern for his family structure would prevent him from ever endorsing any legislation that would weaken or threaten in any way the family unit. There is an almost endless list of responsible and highly accredited women's organizations who have also urged ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment. And these groups could in no way be labeled women's liberation groups or radical groups or groups that would act against the sanctity of the home.
The League of Black Women, in their concern about total liberation for the black and other minority communities, had no choice but to support the passage of ERA in the state of Illinois. It is common knowledge and historical knowledge that our man has suffered by not having such a bill as ERA on our statute books. What do we mean by this statement? Simply that industry and government has chosen to hire the black woman over the black man in order to kill two birds with one stone. Since the 1964 Civil Rights Act, industry has been forced to show minorities are part of their employee staff. What better way to solve this dilemma in some cases but by hiring a black woman? For one, she is black. Two, she can be gotten for less money. The League of Black Women say that ERA will put a stop to this conspiracy.
Our own Illinois Constitution of 1970 contains language identical in effect to the proposed amendment. Let me quote from that. The equal protection of the law shall not be denied or abridged on account of sex. This is presently a statement in our own Illinois Constitution. This guarantee has served us well. It has not disrupted the social and moral patterns of life. Nevertheless, citizens of Illinois have concurrent federal rights which are not as well protected. All federal laws which prohibit discrimination on the basis of sex require enforcement by litigation, costly both to the individual complaining of discrimination
and to the employers sued.
With true equality before the law, we could, in a generation or two, exercise our rights in the most positive ways to improve our whole society. Equal rights will double our options for developing the technology to solve the energy crisis, or perhaps eliminate water pollution. We are offering a 100% increase in talents to find the answers to the sicknesses we have. ERA is more than just an idea whose time it's come. It's a very real chance to double our options. Our girl children and our boy children are loved alike, educated alike, and taxed alike. They must be treated alike under the highest law of this land. I urge you to pass the Equal Rights Amendment out of this committee and help guide it through the House of Representatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Aldred. Actually, you did go a few minutes over the time allotted, and the same elasticity will be afforded the opponents at the end of their hour. There was one other proponent, one of our colleagues, Representative Adeline Geocaris, who is not going to make a statement, but she encourages questions, and particularly regarding the draft. Now, are there questions of the sponsors or the witnesses?
If the 14th Amendment does, in actuality, give equal rights to men, I'd like to have your reasoning as to why it does not extend those same rights to women, since the language of Article 14, Section 1 first defines a citizen and then refers to persons.
If the Equal Protection Clause were felt to apply to men, then it would have been superfluous for the Illinois Constitution to make a provision that specifically states sex. Do you understand?
I'm not here defending the Illinois Constitution.
No, but it's a part of our life, and we might as
Bill of
well
Rights.
live with it. What I'm saying is that if Illinois felt that the concept of person extended broadly to include either sex, then what was the point of putting sex into the Illinois Constitution?
You haven't answered my question.
Mr. Representative, I would like to point out that as a matter of history, the protections of the 14th Amendment, since its adoption almost 100 years ago, has never been extended to include women and in the definition of person under that amendment to the Constitution. Does that address your point?
We are getting into dialogue now, and I'm not going to allow that. Can we stick to questions and answers?
Okay.
At the Virginia legislative hearing on ERA, the opponents presented an 85-year-old woman who said that she was an original suffragette and had been campaigning for women's rights since 1909. She concluded her testimony by saying, "The proponents have the mentality of 50 years ago. They are fighting a battle which is long since won." As I listened to the arguments on the other side, it seems that they are still crying about past and obsolete discriminations, still crying about women not having the right to vote and the right to practice law and the right to serve on juries. But I submit, Mr. Chairman, that they failed to make a case for discrimination today.
At this time, Mr. Chairman, I would like to move that H.J.R. 14 be recommended out of this committee. Do pass.
Representative Bluthart moves that House Joint Resolution Constitutional Amendment 14 be reported out with a recommendation do pass. Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Matajevic and Representative Washington. And on that motion, the clerk will call the roll. On this motion, there are 13 ayes, 11 nays, and the resolution will be so reported.
How do you think it went tonight?
I think it went very well. I think our testimony was orchestrated fairly well. People had rehearsed, they had talked to each other, and it made a great deal of difference, I think, in the presentation of the testimony and sort of the theatrics of it. But I can see a real difference in the conducting of the hearings between last year and this year, simply because we were more prepared. And I think last year, when it failed in the House, it triggered a real reaction on the part of people who were for it, because everyone assumed that it would pass. And when it didn't, people really started to work. There are like 50 organizations in Chicago, some of which are not, normally associated with the ERA, that have endorsed it and worked for it.
Do you feel that you did change any minds?
I'm certain we did, yes. In fact, quite a few of the black legislators who had not felt the our pulse because we had not called upon them to feel it. When they finally found out how the majority of the League of Black Women felt, which is a statewide organization, they came in immediately from their neutral position and took the I position to support it. And we had two legislators that was very adamant who had been, what you might say, snowballed with anti-literature, who felt that they just should support the anti-position until we came to Springfield and lobbied for ERA, and that changed them completely around.
Before the final vote came up in the House, the women made direct appeals to their legislators in their home districts.
Rather than to completely lose ourselves in the fact that it's just a women's struggle, it's also a human rights struggle that includes the rights that blacks still are fighting for, and we can't separate ourselves from that it's just another battlefield.
If we assume, for example, that the job market is going to be opened up, that means there's going to be increased pressure on the job market. If there's increased pressure on the job market, that means that some of the people who are standing pretty far back in the unemployment line are going to go further back in the unemployment line. And I think it's a fallacy to attempt to sell something like this to the black community without recognizing that fact. That's part of the problem. Now, a position that I'm willing to take is that may be part of the price of progress. And if that's true, however, my constituents need to know that. We have to put into a new kind of perspective what the responsibilities are of people who are in equal rights fights of any nature. And we're really talking about human rights. You know, it just so happens that this comes out of a feminine context because that happens to be the issue at the time. But we're talking about human rights, people rights, and that's the context in which I hope this is finally placed. Now, at this stage in the game, we simply cannot afford to let an awful lot of intelligent, well-equipped, well-financed people get away from us on the theory that this job has been done once they get the bill passed. Now, I see people in Springfield, out of my experience, that I haven't seen ever in life before talking about equal rights, and that concerns me. I'm glad to see them, but I want them there when the fight starts, too.
Now, women have been legislated against. We have a history of that in this country, as have Indians been legislated against. And it's about time that minorities, although we are a majority, who have been legislated against, I think it's important that the Constitution of this country have something in there, because at one time it was a law that these people didn't have rights. Now, I mean, your white Anglo-Saxon male has always had rights.
I hate to think that whenever there's any kind of social grievance, that we're going to have to go to the federal Constitution to allay these problems. Now, another
suggesting that the amendment which gives women specifically the right to vote is cluttering up the federal Constitution?
I think if we didn't have that amendment, that by an equal protection clause argument in the Constitution, the growth and liberalization of society, that clearly they would have had it. They had a girl tied up doing nothing but answering letters, for or against. And it's symbolic, number one. It's emotional, number two. And when you really get down and analyze it, I think the practicalities and the necessity for a constitutional amendment becomes number three when I read the letters. Now, even if it passes, you're still going to be faced with the situation that who's going to enforce it? It's the same thing as having a law in the books. If the law isn't enforced, you're going to have to go to court and to have a case and have a court order to enforce the thing. Now, you're going to have that problem. You know, that's why I think it's very absolutely correct. But that's why it's symbolic in nature, and I don't think you should clutter up the Constitution with symbolism. We sit in the state legislature and we're voting on welfare, we're voting on school aids, we're voting on disability programs for mentally retarded children and mentally retarded adults. It really touched the hard core and the heart and soul of a lot of people. And we're faced with 40% of my time in answering mail last session had to do with this goofy equal rights, which is really...
Get it over with.
Yeah, but another thing, a lot of these problems are caused because women do not have equal rights. It's easier for them to stay home than because they can't get a decent job, so they stay on welfare. It's broken up families.
because the men leave because otherwise women have to stay on welfare because they can't get a decent wage.
The husband or the wife is going to have to care for those children in their preschool years. So someone is going to have to stay home. And throughout recorded history of mankind, the woman has always been the one to stay home.
Members, please be in their seats. The doorkeeper, clear the aisles of those persons not entitled to the floor so that we may conduct our business in an orderly manner.
We're now waiting for the Illinois House to vote on a change of the rules to determine what will constitute a majority. The Illinois State Constitution says a 3/5 majority is required to pass a constitutional amendment, and the change has been proposed that a simple majority be required. This simple majority has been ruled on and approved by Attorney General Scott in several opinions, both this year and last, and was approved by the House Rules Committee. And so now we are just waiting to have the outcome of this vote to determine whether we're going to need 89 or 107 votes for passage of the ERA, and then the ERA vote itself can come up.
The House has just rejected the proposed change that only a simple majority, that is, 89 votes, be required to ratify the ERA.
After that rather exhausting debate on the constitutional question, I think you'll be relieved to hear that I am not going to harangue you with arguments at length about the virtues and the possible drawbacks of the Equal Rights Amendment. We've been piling literature on your desk for months. We've been thinking about this for a year. I suspect that each one in this room has made up your mind as to whether you are in favor or against this proposed 27th Amendment.
We ought to note in candor there's absolutely no need whatever for this bill. The language of the Illinois Constitution is very clear, Article 1, Section 18, or wherever it is. If the exact words that are used there are not successful to bring the utopia that the proponents of this amendment seek, how in the name of Susan B. Anthony do you think that it would make any difference to put it on a piece of legal parchment in faraway Washington, D.C.? Finally, we as representatives need to keep in tune with our voters back home. When I went back to the 54th District, I retook their pulse the last few days, and I would report to you and venture the opinion that your constituents feel the same as mine, and that is that these women remain overwhelming in their preference that they'd rather be loved than liberated.
It really is only one question with which we should be concerned, and that is simply this. Are women entitled to full equality of treatment under the law? No other issue truly relates to how one votes today except this one question. Are women entitled to full equality of treatment under the law?
Gentleman from Cook, Mr. Fleck.
Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to clarify, how many votes does this require to pass? I didn't hear any announcement from the chair.
No, because nobody's asked up to now.
I'm asking.
Well, the House rules as they now stand do require 107 votes. So that is what the chair will have to be bound by.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The clerk will take the record. All right, Mr. Clerk, what's... On this question, there are 95 ayes, 72 nays, 2 present. And this resolution, having failed to receive the vote required under the Illinois House of Representatives rules, is hereby declared lost.
The House had just upheld the House rule requiring 107 votes, and we were able to get only 95 votes for the Equal Rights Amendment. Now, the obvious next step is to have a friendly court suit to test this roll call. This is why we did not put it on postponed consideration, because now there it is. It's on the Speaker's table. This vote can be challenged, and it can be determined by the courts once and for all whether the House must have 89 votes or 107 votes for a constitutional amendment.
The mandamus action would be a suit for declaratory injunction, so declaratory relief and injunction, to order the Speaker to declare the amendment ratified.
Other votes that was our problem. And some people, you see, voted on that vote on some very strong feelings they have constitutional aid. You have lawyers who get their own notions about what it ought to be and interpretations of the federal constitution, this sort of thing. And they say, well, the Attorney General says that, but you know, I'm a lawyer too, and I don't agree.
The Attorney General's opinion is very clear, and there are court precedents in other states saying that a state absolutely cannot require an extraordinary majority. Our House voted to do the very one thing that in the Attorney General's opinion we could not do. He said we could have any kind of a logical majority. In other words, we could have had a majority of those present and voting. There's a precedent for that. The Senate in the state of Illinois ratified the 17th Amendment with a vote of 22 to 21 when there were 51 members in the Senate. So there is precedent for having an absolutely simple majority with a quorum present.
What do you think will happen?
Representative Ewell.
I think the courts are going to follow the opinions of Attorney General Scott, and his opinion was that there should only be a majority of the votes necessary, constitutional majority, which would be 89, rather than an unusual majority, which is required to do the which is required to pass an amendment to the state constitution. However, the court process is of such a nature that I doubt that it'll be out in time to do ERA any good this session.
Representative Fleck.
I voted against any rule change or proposals for rule changes to lower that to 89, feeling that it was improper and inconsistent with the provisions of the Constitution. Now, as to the amendment itself, I voted for the Equal Rights Amendment. Against personal desires, my district was against it as far as letters were concerned. However, this morning I did receive a number of petitions with over 1,000 signatures which were for it. But for the purposes of my real reasons for the vote, which threw me over the brink, was a number of months ago I actually made a vote switch with Representative Dyer. I didn't think there was any damage being done with my yes vote today, since I knew it was a virtual impossibility to pass the amendment when the rules changes were not forthcoming.
So you knew your yes vote wasn't going to really help the amendment to be passed?
My yes vote was a symbolic yes vote, just as the ERA is a symbolic amendment to the Constitution.
Representative Kennedy.
Well, I have deep religious convictions, and I talk to the Lord with reference to my conscience. And I came to the conclusion that the abortion issue and the drafting of women had nothing to do with the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment, so I decided to support it because I had found out that there had been discrimination in my district at one of my area newspapers and in all the banks. 75% of the employees at banks in my district are females, and they're discriminated against.
Well, did the lobbying have any effect on your change your vote?
There was a particular witness of the League of Women Voters by the name of Mrs. Kaufman, who supported ERA, who had considerable influence on my voting because she was a very intelligent, eloquent lady, and I talked to her at length about it, and I would be unfair to say that she didn't have some influence on me because of her eloquence and her sincerity. But she convinced me that to look into it further, and I did that, and that's where I am today, and now I'm on television.
So the information from Mrs. Kaufman did help you decide.
I think very much. If you were here for the testimony before the executive committee, she was the best witness they had.
The personal contacts make a difference. They make a difference to the legislators insofar as they are aware of their home district and the possibilities of the activists, and the women who are for ERA are among the most active in the group as far as their opposition is concerned. And if they have a district where the women are strong, then they're much more likely to be voting for it. But you find that the Farm Belt areas, you have a tradition against ERA, and as a result, they read their mail a little more carefully.
Representative McCourt.
About 2 weeks ago, you seemed to be leaning towards a no vote.
Oh, I've been leaning towards a no vote for some time. My mail is, I've got just gobs of things that I oppose it. Philosophically, I think it's unnecessary. But if this symbolic gesture seems to be that important to so many people in the 11th District, I feel that I have nothing to do but vote my constituency's wishes.
You get a lot of pro-contact from ERA.
Fabulous. Really a lot of so much contact, and that's really what did it. When I felt that so many people felt as strongly as they did about it, I just had to vote their conviction, and which are now my convictions.
Secretary of State, if you write and ask him for a copy of the handbook of Illinois government. With the proposed amendment against our Illinois now